We're live.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa salli ala rasulihil kareem. Amma ba'd. Inshallah, in today's topic, we will cover Ijma Sahaba, the consensus of the Sahaba's topic in our Usul Fiqh class today. If time permits, then we may go into, or start at least, the topic of Qiyas. I wanted to finish Ijma Sahaba and the Qiyas by today, but we did not have the class last week, so we have a little bit behind. So, but the purpose is not just to finish more stuff, it's more to understand what we are trying to learn here, inshallah. Okay, so Ijma Sahaba, when it comes to that, this is the third definitive source of Hukm Shar'i. As we have already talked about the Quran and the Sunnah. Now, today we'll start Ijma Sahaba, which means the consensus of the Sahaba, inshallah. And the fourth one is the Qiyas, if time permits, we'll go there. So, when it comes to Ijma Sahaba, Ijma is Ijma. So, consensus of Sahaba, consensus is the Ijma, and the Sahaba, the companions, or companions mean the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, Ijma is a ismul fi'l, verbal noun of the Arabic word ajma, which has two meanings: to determine or to agree upon something. And when we talk about from the Shar'i perspective, in Shara, in the Istilah, it means basically the consensus or the agreement of the Sahaba upon something about which there's no text of the Quran and the Sunnah available. And we'll talk about that. What does it mean by agreement of the Sahaba? In general, we find that there are many types of ijma discussed in the books of Usul Fiqh. Some of these are Ijma al-Ummah, which is the consensus of the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then a second one is Ijma al-Mujtahideen. Mujtahid is the person who has the knowledge to make an ijtihad, meaning to extract the rules from the sources of Hukm Shar'i. Third one is Ijma al-Ahl al-Bayt. And we will talk about these separately, inshallah, if time permits. And the fourth one is Ijma al-Madinah. And the fifth one, which is the one that has the definitive sources, evidences, is Ijma al-Sahaba. And this is what we will be discussing today. Ijma al-Sahaba is the only one that is definitive and agreed upon. If Sahaba after the death of Rasulullah were to agree unanimously, so when we say consensus means unanimously, there is no disagreement among the Sahaba to a problem without any dissent among each other in the absence of a ruling from the Quran and the Sunnah, then this agreement is considered to be a dalil. And this agreement must have been based upon some teachings of Rasulullah which they all knew, but which did not reach us directly in the form of the hadith. Therefore, Ijma' Sahaba is an indication of Sunnah itself. So I make it clear that when we talk about Ijma' Sahaba, it is more of, so obviously Ijma' Sahaba is needed when something is not present directly in the Quran and the Sunnah, in the text of the Quran Sunnah, it doesn't talk about that. But the Sahaba unanimously agree upon an issue, which is a sign that actually this is from the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu, and it was well known among them that they did not even report it as a hadith. Okay, and the examples of the Ijma Sahaba is for one of the examples of Ijma Sahaba is the priority given by to the appointment of the Khalifa when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. The Sunnah we have discussed actually yesterday when we were talking about the Seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we covered the passing away of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And at that time, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was he died on the Monday, and he was buried on Wednesday night. And we are aware of that. This is the ikram of the dead body, that it has to be buried as soon as possible. But when it came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passing away, and he was the He was a leader of the Muslim Ummah. He was the head of the state of the Muslim Ummah. And the Sahaba, they delayed the burial of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam until Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu an was given the bay'ah, or the oath of allegiance, or the pledge of allegiance to Abu Bakr to become the Amir of the Muslim Ummah. So there is no direct hadith or ayah in the Quran that is talking about delaying the burial for this purpose. But all the Sahaba, they agreed on this subject, and they allowed it. There is one of the opinion by Al-Haythami. He passed away in the 1405 Common Era, and he said it is known that Sahaba consented that selecting the Imam after the end of the era of Rasulullah was an obligation, wajib. Indeed, they made it more important than the other obligations, whilst they were busy with it over the burial of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so that's one of the example of the Ijma Sahaba. And similarly, the part about that it is an obligation to appoint a leader over the Muslim Ummah, that is a well-known obligation, which is proven by the textual hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay. So, for example, the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that says, وَمَنْ مَاتَ وَلَيْسَ فِي عُنُقِهِ بَيْعٌ مَاتَ مِيتَةٌ جَاهِلِيَّةٌ, that whosoever dies in the state when the bay' was not on his neck, meaning you don't have a amir to whom you can give the bay' to, then the person dies as in the days of Jahiliyyah. Jahiliyyah means that the days of ignorance before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sent as the messenger, and he called the people towards Islam. Those days are referred as Jahiliyyah days. And similarly, Imam Muslim has another report similar to it. وَمَنْ مَاتَ وَهُوَ مُفَارِقٌ لِلْجَمَاعَةِ فَإِنَّهُ يَمُوتُ مِيتَةُ جَاهِلِيَّةٍ. That means Rasulullah said, he who dies having defected from the obedience of the Amir and discards his association with the main body of the Muslim Ummah, he dies the death of one belonging to the days of Jahiliyyah. So both of them actually are the proofs that having an Amir is an obligation on the Muslim Ummah. Now, the delaying of the burial of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that was a consensus among the Sahaba, because they preferred, or they gave the higher precedence to appointing a Amir over the Muslim Ummah. Okay, so that was the first example of the Ijma Sahaba. And another example of Ijma Sahaba was when Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, when he was on his deathbed, and he specified a limit of 3 days to appoint an Amir after him. And when he even ordered, because he nominated 6 Sahaba, and those 6 Sahaba include Ali bin Abi Talib, Uthman bin Affan, Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, Abdurrahman bin Auf, Zubayr bin Awam, and Talha bin Ubaidullah. And when Umar bin Khattab radiallahu an, he appointed these 6 were from the Muhajirin, and also these were from the 10 Ashra Mubashara, the 10 who were given the glad tiding of the Jannah in this dunya. So these were the remaining 6 that he actually nominated, and he himself was one of them actually. So, but he said this, that if these 6, they do not agree upon one leader, meaning if 4 agree on one and the other 2 did not, and they dispute over the leadership of the 4 that agreed upon, then he actually commanded them that the one who do dispute, then they should be killed. If it's one who's disputing, he should be killed. Now, and he gave the 3 days period of time to agree upon this. Now, this 3 days was that Ijma Sahaba. Then none of the Sahaba disputed Umar bin Khattab's opinion about this, which means that to appoint a leader to rule by Islam after the position is vacated, is vacant. As in this case, Umar al-Khattab was on his deathbed. Then he gave 3 days, and we can see actually from the life of Rasulullah when he passed away, Monday they appointed Abu Bakr by Wednesday night. So this 3 days is considered as the Ijma Sahaba. Okay. Now, when it comes to the evidence, because we just gave some examples for the sake of understanding, when it comes to the evidence about Ijma Sahaba as used as a source of evidence, Sahaba, first of all, were the group who had the best access to the revelation because they were directly in touch with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They are the one, that generation is the one who actually passed on the whole deen of Islam to the following generation, which is the Tabi'een. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam pointed out the best generation was the generation of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is among the referring to Sahaba, and then the next one, and then the next one. So their ijma is a proof for two reasons. Number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has praised this generation as a whole, as a community, not just talking about an individuals, rather as a community of the Sahaba. And there are multiple places in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal talks about them. As in Surah Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ مِنَ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ وَالَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوهُم بِإِحْسَانٍ رضي الله عنهم ورضوا عنه وأعد لهم جنات تجري تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها أبدا ذلك فوز العظيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, as for the foremost, the first of the immigrants and the helpers, and those who follow them in goodness, Allah is pleased with them and they are pleased with Him. And He has prepared for them the Jannat, the gardens under which rivers flow, to stay there forever and ever. That is the ultimate victory, the one who enters into Jannah like that. Now, this compliment is given to Sahaba, which includes Muhajirin and Ansar, for the sole reason of having been the Sahaba. However, the compliment for others is due to the fact they follow the footsteps of the Sahaba. So this means that the original compliment is for the Sahaba. The followers are not complimented, but for the following Sahaba, but for following the Sahaba. So Sahaba were the main ones who were mentioned here, radiallahu anhum wa radu an. Therefore, it can be concluded that the meaning of the ayah is confined to the Sahaba only, and any group of people whom Allah compliments in such a manner, the truthfulness of what they agree on is affirmed. So this is about the Sahaba Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned. And the second reason is a doubt in the trustworthiness, actually. And as I'm saying, I'm repeating this again, we are talking about Sahaba as a group, because a single Sahabi can make a mistake. As we can see that in their lives, we can see there were disagreements among the Sahaba. And so we are not talking here, when we talk about Ijma Sahaba, that we're discussing the things in which Sahaba differed. When we're saying Ijma Sahaba, we're talking about the consensus of the Sahaba unanimously. So Sahaba were the generation that transmitted the Quran and reported the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they are the one who basically conveyed the whole deen to us. This group, the one of the Sahaba, they heard or they learned the Islam directly from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then they conveyed it to us. And as I said, so they are the one who were the vehicle, who were the means of compiling the Quran, preserving the Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised to preserve this scripture through them. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَيَأْتِهِ الْبَاطِلُ مِنْ بَيْنِ يَدَيْهِ وَلَا مِنْ خَلْفِهِ تَنْزِيلٌ مِنْ حَكِيمٍ حَمِيدٍ. Falsehood cannot come at it, Quran, from before it or from behind it. It is revelation from the wise, the owner of praise. And we have discussed the whole thing about the compilation of the Quran, preservation of the Quran in our previous lectures, that the Quran is unanimously have been preserved. There is nothing have been lost, and it has been passed on from the generation of of the Sahaba to the next generation, and on and on. And until today, the Quran have been conveyed or carried to the next generation by the generation, and there is no disagreement on the validity of the Quran. There is no disagreement about any changes have been made into the Quran or anything like that. The important point to remember is that Ijma Sahaba is not the personal opinions of the Sahaba, and I'm saying it again and again, on any technical issue. Rather, so this is not an ijtihad of a Sahabi we are discussing. Rather, it is the agreement on a specific thing with regards to its rule in Islam, an agreement on a Shar'i opinion. The Sahaba would not agree that a certain thing is Islamically permitted or forbidden without knowing whether the action was approved or disapproved by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, the hadith in this regard is not reported. Instead, its rule is conveyed by the total agreement of the Sahaba. The ulama are in agreement that Ijma Sahaba is a binding proof. So, when we are talking about the Ijma Sahaba, we're not discussing personal opinions of Sahaba on technical issues or anything. Rather, we're talking about they all are agreeing on a certain verdict or rule of Islam. As with the hadith, as we talk about the hadith in the past, Ijma Sahaba can be qat'i or dhanni in transmission and meaning. So again, we're talking about Ijma Sahaba is also been reported through the chain. It is reported, its reports are mentioned in the books of the hadith, books of the history of the tariq, which are compiled by reports. I'm not talking about just a history written by one person as his story. He's just talking about Islam or talking about Sahaba. No, we're talking about the books of history that has the chains. A chain or isnad, and as we have discussed when we're talking about the hadith, those chains are verified. The people who are reporting whether it's the Ijma Sahaba or the hadith, they are checked and verified and authenticated, and that then the specific Ijma of the Sahaba was reported. A chain of narrations relating to the agreement of Sahaba may be mentioned in a book of hadith like Sahih Bukhari, a book of history like Tarikh al-Tabri, or a book of fiqh like Kitab al-Umm of Imam Shafi'i. As with a hadith, mujtahideen look at the strength of the narration to determine its authenticity. Same thing goes here as well. Okay. Now, since we are talking about Ijma Sahaba, it is good to know what is a Sahabi then, because it will not fulfill the purpose if we don't know what the Sahabi is. We are talking about Sahaba. So there are two definitions of a Sahabi. Number one, a Muslim who saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is one of the definitions, that a person who saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the state of Islam. Actually, it goes on, a Muslim who saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the state of Islam and he died in the state of Islam as well, of course. So when it's saying a Muslim, it means he was Muslim in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he died as a Muslim. Number two, a Muslim who lived with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for 1 or 2 years or participated in 1 or 2 ghazawat with Rasulullah, led by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, in general, the second definition is the stronger one. Many of the scholars they take the second definition, but again, this is one of the things that can cause sometimes the differences of opinion, which are within Islam. That's okay. When you talk about the latter opinion, which is a Muslim who lived with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which means he has a suhbah of Rasulullah for 1 or 2 years, or participated in 1 or 2 ghazawat with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So famous scholar among the tabi'in, Sa'id bin al-Musayyab, which is a stronger one. It is by Sa'id bin al-Musayyab, has been narrated. He said it is essential that someone has a companionship with Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for 1 or 2 years, or has gone out with him on 1 or 2 battles. Shu'ba reported from Musa, whom he spoke appreciatively about that. He said, I said to Anas bin Malik, are there any companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam left other than you? Because Anas bin Malik was one of the last Sahaba who passed away. So when he was asked about this question, he said there are still many Arabs who saw him. There are many Arabs who saw him. As for his companions, Anas bin Malik said no. So there is nobody left except Anas bin Malik at that time. And Anas was young when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to Medina, and as one of the reports talk about Anas bin Malik, that he said that the best day of his life was when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam entered into Medina, and the darkest day or the worst day of his life was when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. Imam al-Mazini said in his book Shar'i al-Burhan, that we do not mean by Sahaba those who met him for a day or two, or those who attended him for some business and then left. We mean those who followed him, helped him, and were guided by the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, revealed to him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Those are the ones attained for felicity. Meaning, so he's talking about the Sahaba is the one who has a suhbah, the one who has a companionship of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when it comes to Ijma Sahaba, when we're looking at the Sahaba, this is what means by the Ijma of those Sahaba who stayed with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the state of Islam 1 or 2 years, or they fought the battle with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for in 1 or 2 battles along with him when Rasulullah was leading the battle. So that was about the Ijma. We will discuss later on about the other categories of the Ijma, as I mentioned. Ijma of the Ummah, Mujtahideen, Medina, Ahlul Medina, Ahlul Bayt. And these are the ones which do not have the decisive evidence or qat'i evidence that can say that it is definitive to take it as source of evidence. So that will come up when we will be discussing those sources upon which that there is no definitive source, or in general the fuqaha or they did not agree upon, or the scholars of the Usul, they did not agree upon that this is the source of evidence. Now, when it comes to qiyas, so this is the fourth one. Among the one that have the definitive sources, qat'i sources regarding the Hukm of the Hukm Shar'i, fourth one is analogy or the qiyas. Qiyas is a much longer subject compared to Ijma Sahaba. So it will, for sure, I will not be able to complete it today. It may not be able to complete next week also. It depends how much time we want to spend. We'll see, inshallah. And I don't want to confuse the people also with the subject as well. So we just want to have at least enough knowledge that we understand these terminologies, and if it's quoted in front of us, or we read the books where we are trying to understand the opinions of different fuqaha, that would help us, inshallah. Okay, when it comes to qiyas, linguistically, qiyas means is estimation, measuring of a length or a weight or quality of something. So you are estimating something about, that's what the linguistic meaning is. This is why actually another word for scale to weigh things is miqyas as well, which is from qiyas. So as a juristic term, qiyas, the majority of the ulama have defined qiyas as the application to a new case on which the law is silent, or of the hukm of the ruling, hukm of original case, asal, because of the effective reason, illah, which is in common to both. And we'll talk about that. Let's not get confused with. So there are 4 parts in the qiyas that you look at. No, number 1 is the hukm. Second is a new case. The third is what is the old case, original case, and what is the illah. And when I'll give the example, I think it will become much more clear. One of the example is Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu idha nudiya lis-salati min yawm al-jum'ah fas'au ila dhikrillahi wa dharul bay' dhalikum khairul lakum in kuntum ta'lamun. O you who believe, when the call to prayer is made on Friday, then proceed diligently to the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and leave off your business. Here is Bay' is talking about the business, it's a trade. That is best for you if only you know. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَإِذَا قُضِيَتِ الصَّلَاةُ فَانْتَشِرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَابْتَغُوا مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. Once the prayer is over, disperse throughout the land and seek the bounty of Allah and remember that, Allah often, so you may be successful. These are the ayat from Surah Al-Jumu'ah, and we'll talk about that. What is the what is the qiyas that can be made over here? Okay, the ayat that we talked about above is talking about, first of all, when the call to prayer is given. Okay, so the hukm is disengaged from all the worldly commerce, talking about the bay'ah. But ayat is not discussing other things. For example, it's not talking about going to school, going to college, going to you're eating or you're swimming, you are playing sports. It's just talking about the business here. So now, how do we apply? How do we understand here that it applies to other things as well? The ayah mentions that when the prayer is over, then it goes on, to disperse and seek Allah's bounty. This means that there is a reason to leave the commerce, being that if we do not, then we will be preoccupied and will forget the prayer. Now, here the application of qiyas for this example would be for any other activity besides the bay'. This is because the illah, missing the Jum'ah prayer, occurs due to these activities as well. So the illah here becomes the missing the Salatul Jum'ah, because this is what it causes. So if any sporting event is causing the missing of the salah, then that comes under the same category. Or if somebody is going to school, that comes in the same category. So you have to leave all those activities and go to Salatul Jum'ah. Now, obviously, there are other things to which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the rukhsah. For example, if a person is sick, a person is traveling, or the woman, these are the people to whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or a person who's slave. So in these cases, they are given the rukhsah, they were given the permission that they don't have to pray Salatul Jum'ah. So therefore, working, playing, eating, etc. are prohibited in the time of the Jum'ah, because all these activities prevent Muslims from performing the Salatul Jum'ah. Okay. Now, what is the evidence that qiyas is a source of evidence? When it comes to that, this is based on derived on the Shar'i text. These Shar'i texts are the Quran, the Sunnah, or Ijma Sahaba. As we have already talked about Quran, Sunnah, and today we discuss Ijma Sahaba. As we said, Ijma Sahaba, when we talk about that, it is there's no text from the Quran, Sunnah, and thus all the Sahaba have agreed upon something. And the Sahaba are the one as a group are considered as that they did not make mistakes. Okay, so these three have been proven as definitive sources of the Sharia upon which no one can disagree upon. Therefore, the evidence that the illah exists in the text in general is definitive. Okay, I think I have not defined the word illah. It is a good time to at least define the word illah. Illah is the reason behind the hukm, the reason for the existence of the hukm. And that reason comes from the text of the Quran and Sunnah. There is an ikhtilaf of that issue of, there are some of the scholars, they say that that illah can be made from the mind, which is not, the sources are not definitive, so this cannot be taken. And we'll talk about that later on when we talk about the different kinds of qiyas as well, the one we cannot take. But here, when we say the illah means the reason for the existence of the hukm, as we talked about in this case of Salatul Jum'ah, that to leave wadarul bay'ah, here leaving the work is because of Salatul Jum'ah. So hence anything else that can prevent somebody to pray Salatul Jum'ah, that also come under the parallel hukm or analogy of the hukm of the thing that can prevent somebody to pray Salatul Jum'ah. So that's what it means by the illah. So now, going back to the evidences. Okay, so therefore, the evidence that the illah exists in, I'm going to keep using the word illah. Illah means the reason behind the hukm here, which is from the text of the Quran or the Sunnah or Ijma Sahaba. exists in the text in general is definitive and qat'i. This is also the case of the qiyas. When a text mentions reason for a rule extended, sorry, it's only from the Quran Sunnah. When talk about illah, illah comes from the Quran Sunnah, from the text directly. Okay, when a text mentions a reason for a rule, extending this rule to any other issue having the same reason is considered another application for the text of the ayah or the hadith. So that's what it means by that. We're looking for a parallel hukm. That's the reason behind the existence of the hukm. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam demonstrated qiyas and considered it as Shar'i. So see, the term used here is he demonstrated qiyas. It doesn't mean that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself was performing the qiyas. Because we should not forget that when we talked about the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's actions, whether it's his verbal act, what he said verbally, or what he did, his actions, or if he was silent for an action that happened in front of him, they were all directed by the wahi. So he's not the one who was making the qiyas. He demonstrated the use of the qiyas. I hope that I am making it very clear here, the distinction between demonstration and practicing, in a sense of that he was not performing the qiyas. Qiyas means analogy, parallel hukm we're talking about, which is based on the reason of the hukm, or the illah of the hukm. Now, the Sahaba followed him in this regard, and they also consider qiyas as the Shar'i dalil to extract rules. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam also demonstrated qiyas in the following hadith. See, this is again, he's showing the Sahaba something, but what he's saying is this is part of he's directed by the wahi from Allah Azza wa Jal. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Shayba to Sahabiya, when she asked regarding the making hajj on behalf of her father. So if your father owed a debt and you paid it for him, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, would that suffice? She said yes. He said the same is for the debt of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَدَيْنُ أَحَقُّ بِالْقَضَاءِ. That the same is for the dayn of Allah is more reserved than more rightful than the qada. Okay, so that's about. He is giving a analogy from the dayn of if the father had the debt, you pay for it. So this is more debt than regular debt, which is towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here, so we don't say this is a qiyas. Rasulullah did not make a qiyas here. Rasulullah is giving the hukm, but he is giving he's demonstrating that the qiyas can be done this way. Okay, then in order to instruct the Muslims, Rasulullah showed Muslims how to compare the debt owed to Allah to that owed to a human being, such that paying it back fulfills the obligation. Thus, the rule confirms the acceptance of the settlement of the debt. On the other hand, the rule of known hukm may be one of negation. For example, so one was, we just talked about the one regarding a parallel hukm to be done, and now it's talking about something that can be negated. For example, Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he kissed one of his wives while he was fasting. So Rasulullah, he asked Rasulullah regarding this. So Rasulullah said, "Araita law madmad bima'in wa anta sa'im." Rasulullah said, "Would you drink? What do you think if you rinse your mouth with water when you were fasting? Want the sign?" قلت لا بأس. We said there's nothing wrong with that. Rasulullah said, فقال Rasulullah sallam ففيما, meaning then why are you worried? So there is nothing to worry about. This is same as you are rinsing your mouth. So that does not break the wudu, that does not break the fast either. So here again, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam showed Umar al-Khattab how to perform qiyas by comparing the kiss of the fasting person to the rinsing of the mouth, and showing that neither breaks the fast. Okay. Again, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not making the qiyas; he's just showing how to make the qiyas. Okay. Other evidence, the existence of an illah constitutes a common matter upon which comparisons take place. The following hadith is another illustration of the concept of illah and qiyas. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked about the trading of mature dates with dry dates, he asked, أينقض الرطب وإذا يبس قالوا نعم فنهى عن ذلك. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said not to do that in that case, because the weight changes. Based upon the illah, Rasulullah demonstrated qiyas by extending the rule of riba to trading mature dates with the dry dates. So he said no, not to do that kind of action. Okay. Now, then other evidences are, a woman said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, my mother died owing a vow to fast, which is for the nazar. And should I fast for her or not? So this is about fasting. We talked about the Hajj previously. Now this one is talking about fasting. So she said, my mother has died and there is due from her a fast of vow. Should I fast on her behalf? Thereupon he said, you see that if your mother had died in death, would it not have been paid on her behalf? She said yes. And Rasulullah then observe the fast on her behalf of your mother as well. So you can fast for your deceased parents, for example. If they have missed a fast, then you can make it up, or you can do the Hajj for them, because this is allowed by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And another one is a man came from Khatham. Khatham tribe came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. My father embraced Islam at an old age, and he could not ride the camel at the same time. He is obliged to perform Hajj. Should I perform Hajj for him? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, are you the eldest son? He said yes. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied, what if your father owed a debt and you paid it back? Would that settle it? He said yes. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, then perform the Hajj for him. Okay, so this is all these examples. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is comparing and giving, showing them how you can make the analogy here. So these are the evidences to understand that it is allowed to do the qiyas. In both ahadith, Rasulullah instructed Muslims how to draw an analogy between the debt of Allah in fasting and Hajj, and debt to a human being. Both of them share the same illah, which is the existence of the debt that must be paid. So here the illah was the debt, and that debt has to be paid. As the definition of a qiyas is derived from the hadith of Rasulullah, the definition is considered a Hukm Shar'i. The rule that is extracted through qiyas is a Hukm Shar'i that must be followed as any other Hukm extracted from other legislative sources. The definitions and general rules which are extracted from the evidences are themselves considered Ahkam Shar'iyya. So it's not the issue of the Hukm is lesser or not if you are extracting from which source. These are sources of the Shara, and whatever has been extracted from the Sharia that is applicable to all of us as any other ahkam. Qiyas established upon an illah, and illah is the common motive between any two issues. So both of them have the common illah when we are making a parallel hukum or analogy based on the illah. If an illah exists, then the qiyas can be performed, otherwise qiyas is not possible. So illah has to come from the text of the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. According to the strongest opinion, the illah must be stated or derived from the Shar'i text. As I said, there are opinions that they talk about outside the text as well to be used as as an illah. But the strongest opinion is that it is driven from the Shar'i text, from the nas, from the nusus of the Quran and the Sunnah. If this is the case, this qiyas would be Shar'i because the illah has been stated by the Shar'i text. According to this view, if the illah has not been stated or derived from the Shar'i text, then the qiyas cannot be considered valid from the Shar'i point of view. Okay, I think maybe I can give examples to, probably one example will clarify qiyas a little bit, and then we'll stop, inshallah. So the first example is when actually, let me go to this example, for the process first, and that will clarify. Okay. Yeah. Okay. The process have an example also that will make more sense, I think. Okay. So when it comes to the how to make the qiyas, something is defined as sources in usul when it serves as a usul of new ahkam. Qiyas is a source because we can extract new ahkam. As we already discussed about that, there's evidences that shows that qat'i evidences, decisive evidences that Rasulullah showed us multiple places how to do the qiyas. By extending the original rule to new realities via shared illah leads to new ahkam for new realities. Hence, qiyas is a source. This is one of the ways we can appreciate the capacity of Islam to apply all times and places as ahkam can be deduced from new realities and problems. So how do you do that? Number one thing, you have to have the asl. Asl is the old matter, which is mentioned coming from the Quran and Sunnah. Now, what is the new matter? We'll look at that. Then the hukm, the rule, and the illah, effective reason. What was the reason that was causing the old and the new matters to be affected by this reason, illah. Okay, when I give the example, I think that will make more sense, even this text also. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala وَأَعِدُّوا لَهُمْ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن قُوَّةٍ وَمِن رِبَاطِ الْخَيْلِ تُرْهِبُونَ بِهِ عَدُوَّ اللَّهِ. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually obliging us to prepare, okay, with power, ribat al-khayl. Here is talking about with the horses. So you put the fear in the enemy, in the hearts of the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the hukum given in this verse is that the preparation is an obligation. Wa'iddu, first of all, that's the hukum. The old matter used here is to, how do you do that? You prepare the horses. And the illah here was turhibuna bihi adu Allah. So that to terrify the enemy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, as the new matter, it is anything that will realize the illah of the preparation, which is to terrify the enemy. So now we don't have to terrify by the horses. So we're talking about building an army, for example. So when you're building an army, there could be the tanks, fighter planes, the aircraft, whatever the state deems that is good for this purpose. And that's what it means by how you apply the illah on the in a new situation, which is parallel to the previous one. Okay. I think I will go over these examples and the process of qiyas again next week, because there's quite a few things that we have covered and there might be some more questions. So I'll rather stop here and cover the examples of the qiyas next week and the process again next week. Okay, we'll stop here, and if there's any questions or comments, inshallah, I'll try to address them now. So we covered Ijma Sahaba and partially the qiyas. So, brother, is there any questions or?
Looks like nothing. There's no question on YouTube or on Zoom.
Okay. There's nothing. Can stop here, inshallah. Okay. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa nastaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Jazakumullah khair.